I'll share something that I really haven't talked about. In pursuing film and television, I get a call from a friend. He's like, you shoot camera, right? We need an extra camera guy on Dr. Phil this weekend. And then from that, they create the show, The Doctors. And I was right there and I'm reading medical journals. And I had sort of elevated to the place where I'm a producer, which means I'm going to decide the content in the show. In my family, that's the dark side. It always was. We're the first medical talk show. And so here's this kid that never was anywhere near it. And I'm now inside the dark side, and they're showing me every weapon they have and showing me how they use it on society, the best way to use it, all of it. So when my mom's asking that question, like, what are you doing there? I was like, I don't know, but it feels like I'm supposed to be here. I mean, they are showing me everything on how the whole world is being manipulated in this space. At a certain point, I was really getting uncomfortable with it. And this march towards SB 277, there's people starting to speak out. I should be the one making media to stop SB 277. Making a documentary about this whistleblower, and I am in the one job where I can't go near any of this. Show me what I'm supposed to do. My phone rings in my office. Suddenly, my whole life, all of it made sense. And I'm looking at a documentary and I realize not only am I equipped to make this film what it needs to be, I'm pretty sure I am the best specific human on the earth to be here right now.
Welcome back to the great Paul Meyer. You've been here before.
I have. I was here back in October. Alex invited me out. It was spectacular. The kids call it the greatest vacation we've ever had. To this date, they were really upset we didn't bring them.
Now, generally, when the kids have a great vacation, mom and dad do too. It's sometimes in our experience, it doesn't always line up. The kids are having a terrible time. And we just like, you know what? We had a good time. We took care of ourselves.
No, it was wonderful. It's such a beautiful place. And I keep, what an amazing environment. And, we were talking this morning, just the architecture, connection to nature, sort of these binaural beats everywhere you're going. I mean, Alex, honestly, it's transcendent as far as a place to get away. So I'm really, really happy to be back.
Yeah, and it's great. It was a great surprise for Peyton and I to know that you were going to be showing up here this weekend.
Yeah.
This is our second Bee Fest, and it was really transformative for us last year. And it's not in the traditional sense of a retreat where you come, you do a bunch of deep work, you get all the emotions out, and it's heavy and hard. And like, what's the theme today for the panel, which will be coming up after this, and for our conversation? I started to think about something that you and I were talking about last night, how you're like, I'm just this Colorado hippie, and look at what's presented to me today. Mm-hmm. And for me, I had a similar journey in that I was a trader in Chicago and I had moved to Austin and I guess I was going through this cognitive dissonance, like stuff just didn't make sense. And whether it was my own ideas of what success was and this idea of just always striving, always trying to earn people's respect, earn love, whatever it is. And when I really started to let go of that, it was amazing the people that literally started to show up in Austin on our doorstep. And you and Lee were two of the people that showed up. And I was like, Dell's coming to our house for this event?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. And we really connected in many ways, but you've been such a guide and mentor for me. And I know for some people here, Marie in particular, you've been a voice and given us context for what the fuck is going on out there.
Yeah.
And sometimes it's a hard truth that not everybody's ready to explore. Fortunately for me, I was ready. I was really ready for some different answers than what I had been taught.
Mm-hmm.
And so grateful for you to be here today to share some of that and really just let the conversation go where it goes, as it always does.
Cool.
So thanks for being here.
Oh, it's great being here.
I'd love to for you to just give people a little context for, before we get into what's next, how the HighWire, your weekly program, came to be. I know you started working on a show called The Doctors.
Yeah.
And that was really kind of inspiring in many ways, in ways that you had no idea when you stepped into that role.
Yeah. First of all, I'd love to just ask a couple of questions just so I know, who's in the room. Let me just start with, how many people know who I am? Was everyone in the room aware? Most of you are. How many of you saw the documentary that sort of launched me into this? How many of you have ever seen an episode of the HighWire? Okay. How many of you avoided the... Okay. How many of you still think there are good, just not, or anything like that? Okay, a couple of you. Great. Okay. I just don't want to trigger anybody too hard. You're in the middle of this beautiful sanctuary. So let's just try and keep it, light. It's always hard to really figure out where I start answering that question. How did I get here? What transpired? But I do, I like to bring up my parents because I think conscious parenting is super important. And I'm one of these people that was really lucky to have very, very conscious parents. My parents marched in the 60s, total hippies. Mom decided just to not me, mostly because she was Native American, didn't have a lot of money. They would test all the new drugs and things on her family. Every time she was sick, her mom would take her to the doctor. They'd try some new product. And so my mom just remembered being sick all the time and finally just stopped ever saying to her mom, I'm sick. She's like, I'm just going to deal with this on my own. I don't want to go to the doctor. So then when the moment came to, I was the firstborn to me, she just said, no, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing that. It doesn't make sense. And so there wasn't some science behind it. It was just sort of her feeling and very instinctual. So I grew up with Edgar Cayce was the sort of heart of the teachings that, when it came to health. So, my parents sort of used Edgar Cayce readings. I don't know how many people know who Edgar Cayce is. So probably the most proven psychic, sort of turn of the century, 1800s, early 1900s. That just was able to heal children by entering their bodies anywhere in the world and in trance, saying what was wrong with them. And from those downloads, there's a whole, concept of health and things. And so that was what I was raised with. And mostly mind over matter. My mom would say, if you don't take it into your consciousness, it can't affect you. And so if a television started having a cancer commercial, my mom would just turn off the TV. You don't ever embrace those words. You don't bring those into your consciousness. And so it's really interesting, that, and part of my upbringing, was challenge, always trusting my own intuition. Obviously my parents were sort of anti-establishment because the whole 60s marching. And so I was raised with, you are the most important authority in your life. And that meant, and really when you're raising kids, to question authority is not the easiest lesson to raise them in as the primary focus, because there's only one authority in the house, and it's the parents. And so, we have a loud, argumentative family. My wife can attest to that. But now I find myself in debates all the time, and I feel very well equipped by it. I'll share something that I really haven't talked about and it is, I always sort of gloss through this part of it. So I wanted to be a filmmaker. My dad was a minister. My dad was a very dynamic, I would say more of a motivational speaker. He was a unity minister, but he kind of pushed all the outside the envelope of what that was. I think it was just the closest to where he was at, but, taught meditation to huge crowds of people and Course in Miracles and all of this. So,
you were on that path as well, yeah?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm stuck in the church running sound and lighting. You have no choice but to sort of, be a part of that path on some level. And so my dad would have wanted me, I think, to be a minister. And I would always say, Dad, I just want to affect more people than just some room full of people. I just feel like I'm here for a reason. And my parents raised me thinking that we were all here with an ability to change the world. And, I guess if you program your children to believe that, there's something to that socialization. And I always wonder how much of what I'm doing is my own sort of moral authority or my own innate instinct, or how much of it's because my parents socialized me to believe I could make a difference in the world. Like I'll never know the answer to that, right? I only am what I am. So in pursuing film and television, and I remember I went to Hollywood, my dad said, my dad had done some writing too and dabbled in that space, but he said, Hollywood just demeans the human spirit. Don't be a part of that. Like, raise us up. If you're going to, get into arts and things on that level, make sure that you show the beauty in humanity. So really, it was sort of a very long, troubled, I wouldn't say failed entertainment career, but I waited tables for 20 years trying to get something to happen. And one day a friend, and I was doing theater and short movies and music videos and all that, and had screenplays that were being optioned. So it was always there really close. But let's just jump to, I get a call from a friend that's, he's like, you shoot camera, right? I was like, yeah. He's like, well, look, we need an extra camera guy on Dr. Phil this weekend. We're doing this Love Smart Island thing. And would you want to do that? And I said, yeah, sure. I mean, it pays better than waiting tables. And that began a whole journey. I ended up, one thing after another. I worked for Dr. Phil as a producer and a field shooter and going out and doing stakeouts on couples and are they cheating on each other? Like all this stuff. And then from that, they create the show, The Doctors. And I was right there. I was the top. At that point, I was one of the top field producers for Dr. Phil. I would do anything. I found it really interesting. And so I went around and started creating this show where we're going to, celebrate medicine. And my mom called and she's like, what are you doing working on a medical talk show? Of all the people in the world, you have never been to a doctor. I'd never been to a doctor in my life, ever. Never went to a pediatrician. I mean, none of it. In fact, my mom barely would take me to a chiropractor. I mean, I'd have to throw myself off a cliff skiing, thought I broke my arm. And the best I get is, all right, we'll go to a chiropractor and see if we can't straighten you out. So what was really interesting, I end up in this medical space and I start producing there and I'm reading medical journals. And I had sort of elevated to the place where I was shooting surgeries at first, but then eventually I became a producer, which means I'm going to decide what is the content in the show. I'm one of 7 producers doing that. And I'm starting to read medical journals and try to put shows together. Now I had we're all competing for the hot medical story. And there's not a lot. It's not a lot of breaking news in medicine. So the 7 of us are it was like a war, 2 a.m, we'd have this thing called dibs. If you saw a news story around medicine, you'd had to email everybody and say, dibs, this is my story. I got this. Right. And so it was very, because there's just not a lot. But I had a secret weapon in that I was going to read Health Rangers. I'm reading Mike Adams. I've got Dr. Mercola. No one in the entire building is thinking of looking there. And I'm finding stories there. And so I was really challenging the medical authority. But here's what I want to say is that I'm on this medical talk show. So our sponsors are Merck and Pfizer and Sanofi Aventis. I'd have to go out and shoot interstitials, things with Merck on a new product and how they want to create fear and how they want to, and so what was so weird is I had never, ever even looked at medicine or science. And there's this argument right now in germ theory, terrain theory. I wasn't in either of those camps. To me, I was raised, all of this is in our minds, right? All of this is what we decide to make of it. And so suddenly I'm being indoctrinated into germ theory, really, like disease and all the things my mother taught me to avoid. And they're teaching me the tools that they use to manipulate the world. We're the first medical talk show. And so here's this kid that never was anywhere near it. And it was literally like in my family, that's the dark side. It always was. And I'm now inside the dark side, and they're showing me every weapon they have and showing me how they use it on society, the best way to use it, all of it. So when my mom was asking that question, like, what are you doing there? I was like, I don't know, but it feels like I'm supposed to be here. I mean, they are showing me everything on how the whole world is being manipulated in this space. Meanwhile, I'm doing shows that are challenging that medical establishment. I'm the highest rated producer on the show. So basically everything I want to do, I'm getting to do. I walk in and pitch a show that I found, like a story on Mercola. And they're like, Del, that doesn't even make sense. I don't understand what it's about. And normally executive producers, if you've ever worked in television, are screaming at every other producer, you moron, like this. With me, it's like laughing and joking, like, Del, it doesn't make any sense. Like, is it going to rate? It's like, doesn't all my stuff rate? They're like, yeah, it does. It's like, how about you let me do it? And that was sort of the ride I was on. So all of that to say, and I think when we talk about, what we're all doing here in spaces like this, I get this sense most of you are in an evolved space when we look around us and how people are all around us. I think we're here for a reason. And I really felt like, I know without a shadow of a doubt that I was put there for a reason. And so then what happened, as the story goes, I'm doing a bunch of controversial stories. The lawyer for the doctors said I'm the most expensive producer they have. Everything I'm doing is challenging industry. I'm going after Monsanto. I'm, all these different things in a very creative way. And then I stumbled upon the story of a whistleblower inside the CDC. Not even stumbled. I got a call from someone I'd done a show with that said to me when I was working, a radiologist. And it was it could be in its own book, that story, but I did this show with him. And while we were working on it, he said, look, you don't want me on the doctors. I was like, what do you mean? He said, well, if you look me up online, I'm considered to be a quack. I was like, oh, why is that? He's like, well, I'm one of these doctors who believe that cause autism. I said, oh, well, this story has nothing to do with that. He's like, yeah, but it's going to undermine my credibility. I was like, I'll worry about that. And then he said, all right, would you ever do a story on that? I said, not unless some game changer happens. This show is pretty locked in on, but if something big happens, let me know. And so he did. He called me about a year later, said there's now a whistleblower inside the CDC that has handed over 10,000 documents proving that they've committed scientific fraud on the safety studies, and specifically the study done on the MMR and autism in 2000, 2004. So that, I pitched it. Is one of the only stories my executives wouldn't let me near. They weren't going to piss off the CDC. They weren't going to piss off Merck, that was a sponsor of ours. And so, there's so many miracles that put me in there. But let me go ahead and just talk about that for a second. So I am. I am watching an interview. I see the interviews of this guy inside the CDC, just like the doctor had said. 2 weeks later, I start seeing these excerpts from this interview. I don't know where it's coming from, but Dr. William Thompson is saying, we manipulated the study on what is, I think, one of the great scientific frauds of all times. And so looking at that story, I couldn't go near it. And obviously, like, is it true? I want to meet the guy. What's going on there? And then I probably, as fate would have it, I don't think I would have, I was just watching it saying, like, somebody's going to cover this. And no one did. It was getting shut down, censored everywhere. I started realizing, wow, that is there's a huge cover up going on here on this story because this is a really big. I thought if this is real, this is the biggest medical story of my lifetime. But I would have let it go, except that in about a month later, I get a call from the stage, and I had a show that had a guest that had just dropped out. And for I forget what reason. So they're like, I get a call from an executive, like, Del, your show's going live tomorrow. We need to fill your 5th segment. We're taping that right now. Come on over. We got a story we're putting in your show. So I run over the stage and I got to take notes really quick so that I can go and edit it really quick. And it is the moment where Senator Richard Pan in California walks out on the stage to propose this brand new law he has, SB 277, that's going to force every kid in California. So I don't know if I had never heard of that until the doctors. I'm not sure if that's the first time it was announced, first time I ever heard of it. And I'm thinking of all the people that I'm sitting here, and this guy is to me the end of the world as I know it, my world. I have my first child already. I haven't that child. I'm not, and this guy is going to make it illegal to live the way I'm living. And I just remember thinking, all right, this is the moment I may have to come clean with my executive producers on who I am. You know what I mean? I've been kind of a Trojan horse in here, but I am not going to have my name on this. This is not going in my show. I went over to the executives and just said, look, that was like, this guy went on for like 15 minutes and I have a 2-minute slot. I don't think you want to cut it down that much. That shouldn't go in my show. And they're like, yeah, good point. And I did something else. But from that moment on, now I have a moral problem, an ethical problem with being on the doctors. They are promoting the heck out of this idea that every kid should be forcibly, and that is just antithetical to anything that I believe. And at a certain point, I was really getting uncomfortable with it. And this march towards SB 277, there's people starting to speak out. And I'm thinking, my God, I should be the one in media telling the truth about. I should be the one that's like making media to stop SB 277. I should be, making a documentary about this whistleblower. And I am in the one job on the planet where I can't go near any of this. There's something wrong. My life is out of balance now. And I sat down when it got really tough one day in my office and just decided I'm going to just pray. And I just prayed and said, God, I feel like I've had a purpose and I really appreciated this job. I really appreciated this journey I've been on. It's been really interesting and great. But now I have a skill set that I believe I'm the one that is supposed to be making a documentary about this whistleblower. I'm supposed to be using media now to save the children of the world from this sickness and how they've taught me how to wield it on people. I'm the perfect weapon, and I'm in the wrong place. Like, guide me, like give me a sign, literally just show me what I'm supposed to do. And I, said amen. And 30 seconds later, my phone rings in my office, and I pick it up, and it's this PR agent manager that I'd talked to. She was in natural health and things. She knew that I was sort of like the poorest place you might get some of her stories in. She said, hi, Del, it's Donna. I said, hi, Donna, what's going on? She's like, do you know who Dr. Andrew Wakefield is? I'm like, yes. And for those of you who may not know, this is literally the doctor that said the MMR is causing autism, in the world. So it's obviously at the heart of, the story I'm interested in. And I said, yeah, why? And she said, would you like to meet him? I said, absolutely. And she said, well, he's going to be in 3 days, he's coming to Hollywood. He's going to be in the Hollywood Hills. And there's a small group of people, like 40 people can meet him. And then I wanted to invite you. And she said, but look, I'm actually going to deny someone being there so that you can have that spot. So I need to know you're going to show up. I said, Donna, if you knew when you just called me, you would know I would skip a family wedding right now to be there. And I didn't know, I didn't really know a lot about Andy. I just knew he's this controversial figure in the middle of this story that, has always been about. The only thing I know is my mom did. I don't know the science around it or any of that, but clearly this must be someone I'm supposed to meet. 30 seconds after I prayed about it. So my wife, Lee, and I did some investigations on Andy and what did his wife look like, and just try to show up with some understanding. And we get to this backyard event in Hollywood, and Lee goes over and starts talking to his wife. And I go over and she's like, come on over. And then she invites Andy over. And so for about 30 minutes, I always want to know, like, I'm going to know if this guy's legitimately the worst human that's ever existed, which is how science portrays him, or whether he's real. And I don't know how many people in the room have ever met Andy Wakefield. It takes about 30 seconds to realize this is one of the most beautiful, brilliant, intelligent, grounded, amazing human beings that has ever walked this earth. And so after 30 minutes, I was just like, what about this and that, and he just had answers to everything. But I didn't know, somebody walks up and they're like, Andy, you got to do your pitch. I'm like, your pitch? He's like, oh, sorry, Del. And meanwhile, there's a whole group of people that are pissed off that I'm stealing all his time, right? They're there to meet him. And I've had him, for 30 minutes. He's like, all right, hold on, Del. And he goes and steps up on this box. I always say I swear it was like a soapbox. Like he got in a soapbox in his backyard. And so I was like, all right, whatever this is about. He gets up and he says, look, these laws like SB 277, they're trying to take over the world. Like you are going to have no control of your children's bodies. You're not going to have control of your own bodies. You've got to stop this. I'm telling you, I know more now than when I got into this. And he was laying it all out. And then he said, but why I'm here and what I'm here to do about it is that for the last year and a half, I've been making a documentary about Dr. William Thompson, a whistleblower inside the CDC. I was like, I can't even, I still get chills when I think about that moment. It's like time stops and that, the clouds part and a sunbeam just comes down on you. And I was just like, oh my God, 3 days ago, I prayed, give me a sign, 30 seconds later. And now this is the guy who's got a documentary, I guess, ready to go. And so I remember the thought was, as he was finishing up, I know this is my destiny. But I remembered growing up in Boulder and all the hippies and friends and things. And like, those people that come up to you like, Del, I had a dream that we were going to work together. And like, you're like, whoa, cray, cray, I just thought, don't be that guy. Okay, this is a scientist. And so I just asked him, so where's this documentary at? He said, well, we're almost finished. We need distribution and we need a soundtrack. I said, all right, well, let me see what I can do. I'll see what I can do. Now, I didn't know at that time that I was the producer that had been brought to meet him. So I'm thinking he doesn't know who I am and I'm going to work in slowly. I only later would find out, oh no, it was all about you. I was like, oh, okay. But in that moment, so I thought, okay, I got to find him music. I got to find a way in. So let me see if I can think of music. And my wife had picked up, she never would ever pick up Hitchhikers, but about a year earlier, for whatever reason, she'd been driving up to Bank Canyon, sees a guy carrying like 2 djembes on his shoulder or something, like just like schlepping up and like pretty with his thumb out, pretty safe. Takes the guy into her car, and it turns out that he does soundtracks for like Terrence Malick films, these giant, sweeping scape music things. And so he's the only guy I know really that actually could do a score on a movie. And so I call him and I'm hey, Francesco, look, would you ever consider doing music for a movie, about? And he said, oh, you mean those things that are killing our children? And I was like, I'll call you back. And then I called a production company or a distribution company that I'd almost worked with several times that had made a lot of controversial documentaries, one of them being Outfoxed. Like they really went after Fox News. And so they got into the middle of that controversy. And so I called them and said, would you make a documentary made by arguably the most controversial figure in this, Dr. Andrew? And they said, are you involved? And I said, yeah. And like, if you're involved, we'll take a look at it. And so nobody's going to watch this. I mean, it's like going to a, medical class, and I realized in that moment, as I was looking at it, that suddenly my whole life, all of it made sense. All of the mistakes, all the films that didn't get made, my successes, my failures. I ended up on Dr. Phil. I ended up on this doctor's television show. They show me how this whole system works, a whole science I never cared about or thought about. Now I love it. I'm in the middle of it, and I'm looking at a documentary, and I realize not only am I equipped to make this film what it needs to be, I'm pretty sure I am the perfect, most, specific human on the earth to be here right now. And in that moment, I realized I had just run into my destiny. This hole that I'd had, this thought that I was here to make a difference in the world. And I've been doing sweat lodges and all of this self-healing, trying to say there's something in this earth I'm supposed to be doing. I cannot figure out what it is. And in that moment, I thought, this is it. None of it made sense. I was literally trained by something bigger than me. Who would have ever taken this journey? It just was outside of anything I'd ever planned on. And so when people come up and they say, it was amazing that you risked everything and left television and, left all that behind to make this documentary. I mean, it was the easiest decision I have ever made in my life. It was so clear to me, for this I was born. And the rest is kind of history.
So thank you for just wrapping that up in such a beautiful thread, because I think that's such a big thing for all of us. Do I matter? Why am I here? And I think we get impatient and we start down, these different paths. And sometimes we feel like it's the wrong path. But as my friend Boyd Vardy likes to say, the path of not here is part of the path of here. So it's like, you don't know until you go to the doctors and your mom's like, why are you on that show?
Yeah.
And you didn't really know why, but you were gathering, you were building up your arsenal to really understand what's going on. You hadn't had exposure to that. And then these breadcrumbs just appear and you just continue to follow them. And then boom, it all unfolds like, oh, this is it.
Yeah, I was saying to you last night that, when I was struggling with what am I doing with my life? I'm 20 years of waiting tables, nothing's going anywhere. All the things, just fish that got away stories, one after another. And then, I read, The Secret, like we all did. And the book just pissed me off. I was like, I've done every step, each one of these guys, and none of this is working for me. Right. And then, I get to this place in my life and I said, I don't want to, I'm going to be another one of those jackasses that writes a book. Here's how you do it. Here's how you find your destiny or whatever. But, as I think about it, number one, at least if my life is some example, or there can be no wrong turn, right? I have to look back and say there was absolutely, was there some other destiny I could have run into? It's so crazy how perfect it is what I landed in, that I imagine all of it, all the getting off, all the times I got fucked up on drugs, maybe we got lost. I mean, I wasn't a drug addict, but trying everything to find some space, all of these journeys only to sort of land right there in that moment, which all I can imagine, I have to believe the universe is honorable. I have to believe that we are all equal, in created in the image and likeness of God, that we are all being handed or directly a part of a set of decisions that has a destiny for us. I tell myself that because otherwise then the universe is unfair. But if that's true, then what is the message that those of us, I think many are in the room that find that destiny, what do you share other than, I guess all those times I was missing it, all the times I'm sitting in the sweat lodge, what's my destiny? What's my destiny? I will say, a lot started shifting. The healer I was working with, or shaman, or whatever you call it, we want to call him. We were doing like a sweat every, men's group once a month for like 2 or 3 years. And I remember right about before my life started shifting, one day he said, "Gentlemen, I'm hearing a lot of the same prayers in here for years."
Turn the page.
And he says, the Great Spirit must have answered you by now. So I have to imagine you're not listening. And it was true. It was actually true. I realized that I was trying to force, when I was asking this question, what am I supposed to do? I wanted to be a movie maker, and I was going to be making movies. And so anything else that wasn't a movie, I wasn't listening to it. So it was just, so I was trying to demand that that hole that was going to be filled, that I was going to be filled the way I wanted it to be filled. And I came out of that, and I really embraced that and thought, wow, he's right. The answer has been given to me. And it was in that moment, honestly, I was making television. I was faxing it in on the doctors and Dr. Phil, and still trying to get a movie made the whole time, and getting doors shut in my face. And I'd already won an Emmy Award at this point on the doctors. My friends were like, "Dude," I was like, "Yeah, but it's not what I'm supposed to be doing." And I came out of that sweat, and I thought, you know what? Instead of, focusing on film, which is slamming its door in my face all the time, and I'm giving no attention to television, which everyone loves me and is opening the door everywhere I go, but it's not what I want to do. I don't want to be a daytime talk show host, or something like that. But I said, let me focus where I'm being loved. Let me just let go of this 18-year-old idea of I'm going to be the next Steven Spielberg. Let me let go of being held hostage by that, and go where I really am being loved. And that shift within a year, ironically, I'm watching my name on a movie screen in theaters all across the world. And so, it was letting go of the need to make a movie that somehow it did end up being a part of this journey. But again, I just think we all are, and I think we are living in a spectacular moment of manifestation. And we can really manifest real darkness upon ourselves right now. It's open to us. Or in this tumultuous energy, there's just a brilliant kinetic energy. If we can find that destiny, that focus right now, and use that energy, I think we can really be those world changers that we thought was like mythical growing up.
Yeah. What I hear from this is just surrender, and finally just letting go. And it's not like you just throw at this vision of what you're meant to do, but rather than focus on a key point, like this is the only way that I'm meant to show up in the world. It's like heading in that direction. And then, as you said, following the love, following like what your true gifts are that maybe you don't even know, but others are affirming that and opening to that. And then just being curious about where that leads us. And it led you obviously to Vaxxed, and then starting the HighWire, mm-hmm. and then how you met Aaron Siri with ICAN. Like it just, in today, what's happened, like it's incredible. I feel like it's that moment of surrender, and then all the doors open, doors that you didn't even know existed.
Well, let me speak to that. Can I share our story, honey, about Orion? I just want to sort of, what leads me, and it's all about surrender. Part of the journey, Lee and I were pregnant with our second child, and we had our first child at home, and we had done one ultrasound. That was it, 26 weeks or something, whatever, 20 weeks, just so the midwives would know what was going on. And the night before, and it's the only time we would go to a regular doctor, right, to get the ultrasound. Otherwise, we're just hanging with the midwives. And the night before, I couldn't sleep all night long, and just kept thinking Down syndrome, Down syndrome, Down syndrome. And I was like, oh my God, Del, like in coming from how I was raised, like you're going to manifest something here, like let it go, like just clear your head, let it go. I just couldn't. But I didn't say anything to Lee. I didn't want to, upset her or anything. And we went to get an ultrasound, and this old guy, and he's going through the whole process, and after, he's been like quiet for like 5 minutes, or it felt like an eternity. And I've shot surgeries a lot. I've been in rooms when the surgery is going wrong. There's a real energy to that in medicine, and this is one of those moments. And so I said, "What's going on?" And he said, "Well, your baby has a hole in their heart." And Lee immediately was very emotional. But I was like, okay, I've done shows about we can do surgery in utero to fix. Like, is that the only problem? He's like, well, no, that's what I've been spending time on. The circumference of the child's head is too round. The distance from his wrist to the elbow isn't correct. I think you have a chromosomal issue. Again, this is one of those stories that has so many incredible parts to it. But we decided to get an amnio, which we said we would never do. But now we want to know what's going on, and we have to wait till Monday to find out what's taking place. And so, in that, there's a few things that happened. Lee, I would say, has sort of I call it Catholic light. Had been to Easter and Christmas and things, but I know it's enough that she's not going to abort, which is really your only option. At least I'm thinking that's going to be her decision. But for me, my dad's a New Age minister. We believe in reincarnation. Children can come back. Like there's a whole way to excuse this if this was a decision I wanted to make. So I really sat with it, and I thought, and called my parents. My dad's like, Dell, your life is difficult enough. You know what I mean? You finally have things going. This is going to lead to probably a handicapped child that's going to really, and that's not fair to the soul of that child to trap them in this body. And like, this is like this whole advice I'm getting. And I remember just thinking, so I could tactically kill this baby and not have to handle all the difficulty that would bring. And this is a decision that's, whether or not Lee's going to make that. For me, am I going to make that decision? And I really grappled with the concept of karma on that. And it wasn't, I don't believe that karma is that, I hit somebody, so it means that I'm going to get hit. I'm going to get it back. I believe karma is that the moment I hit somebody, I now live in a world where people hit each other. I have to be worried about being hit. That is now a part of my consciousness and my experience and everything I do. So I thought, what is the world I live in if I kill a child or, this existence to make my life more convenient? And I just thought into my future, that means every problem I am ever going to come onto is going to be all my responsibility. And because I kept a life from coming to this world to fix a problem, where will I stop with that? And the amount of responsibility of that. And I just said, oh, hell no. No, I don't want that much responsibility. This is on God. I'm handing this to you, God. If I'm supposed to have a child that is, has handicaps or whatever it is, that's on you. I'll carry it. I'll be in love in that space. And I truly did. That's why I told that story, surrender in that and through that. And Lee and I had an amazing experience and incredible conversations for the entire 9 months. We made it all the way up until the day before the child was due, and then we lost him in utero. But I will say this, that, as a producer, I think of all that can go wrong ahead. I can fix things. I predict where it's going. I'm really good at getting things done. And through that process of going with that child and through that experience, to totally surrender to whatever this was bigger than me. This was just bigger than I can do anything about. I found God in that life form. Orion taught me that something powerful, so beautiful is taking place. And all I can do is be present and show up for what I'm being asked to do. And it's hard to explain, but in the surrender to, I'm not in control. I am not able to change everything in the world. God is in this. I developed such an amazing belief that anything is possible through God. And it has become a very empowering. And people are like, how do you have the courage you have to do the things that you're doing? And there's no way I could do this without God. I don't think about my life. I don't worry about the things, I don't worry whether I can win or wherever it's going. I know I'm being guided, that God has got this, and all I am is a vessel in this powerful, raging river. It would be stupid to fight it. I think all of our lives, we're just trying to just work our way through it, instead to just really say, okay, all I can do is use this powerful inertia to try and, move with it and achieve something in it. And surrender, it's so hard. Our egos really, really fight it. But it's the only way we actually can change this world, is it because we don't do it. We have got to get out of the way and let ourselves be the vessels that are being asked in this time to readjust, to get reconnected to source. Source is calling upon us. We're not going to brain it out. We're not going to outthink everything. The answers are coming to us. I really believe that. I think that our destiny is in us, but we've got to say yes. We've got to go where we're loved. We got to follow the flow of energy that's moving through us. Stop fighting it. It's all, I have to imagine that must be true for all of us.
Well, thank you thank you to Lee and you for sharing that. That's really powerful and really lands for sure that idea of surrender and I think we all get in those challenging periods, whatever it is. Everyone has their different story, and Peyton and I have had some challenging times in the past year that you want to fix it. It's the first place you go right to the head, and you're like, okay, how can I get out of this? How can I fix this and make things better? And when there's nothing available, there's no choice but to surrender and just hold that, the hope and the faith that you will get through this. This too shall pass, and there will be greater understanding when you're on the other side of it. And it will take, I'm sure even years from now, I'll look back on this particular period and, have even more gratitude than I have right now for something objectively is pretty shitty. But yeah, thank you for that.
I would say, even for me, I'd take it a step further than that. I think that these challenges in our life, and I've talked to a lot of people about this, it's those super, super difficult times that really are the guidance. We are guided by tragedy. These moments are when we see, once we find our place in different steps of our evolution, when we're really in a place where we're so grateful for how great things are. It's when we reflect back and say, oh my God, that turning point where I was lost was that super difficult, challenging experience. I always say, for me, the image I hold is that, like, we're all wandering in the dark, we don't know where we're going. And then suddenly you run smack in a wall and you break your nose. And in that moment, it's the most clear that the direction you're supposed to be going is 180 degrees that way, right? The rest of the time we're lost, but now I have real clarity. So what, and Lee and I, as we've gone through things, I've tried to teach myself to actually really enjoy the pain, like just take it in and say, I know I will look back on this in my rearview mirror and have total gratitude for it. So why can't I have gratitude for it while it's taking place? And for some reason, I always think about Lee and I were in this is what comes to mind. We were in an acting class. There was a method acting class. This is when we met in New York years ago. And method acting is all about like sense memory and, being able to call up memories you've had so that you can be a better actor on stage. And our teacher told the story that he had a famous student and really rich family. And she got kidnapped and was like, grabbed and hooded and thrown in the trunk of the car. And she eventually, they paid the ransom, whatever it was. She ends up being released like 4 or 5 days later. They said she came back to an acting class and we're all like, oh my God, what was that? She's like, it was amazing. And let me say, she's like, at first course, I was like totally terrified and panicked. But then I realized I'm either going to live or die. But if I live, it'd be really stupid to have just been like freaked out the whole time. Like, let me check in because this is going to be the best sense memory exercise you'll ever have. And so just turn the whole thing into an acting experience, right? So I think about that, right? Instead of like just, and we're going through something, do I get even more out of it if I can find gratitude while it's happening?
Oh, that's beautiful. Of course you have that story. And I do love it. It is, I feel like it's those really challenging times are a reorientation to what your path is. And I think when things are great, we love that. We're blissful. Mm-hmm. And like you said, the lights are off and we're just going through and we're in flow and there's a beauty in that. Yeah. But you do lose your way. And I think that's, in my experience, it was like, oh, we just lost our way. And there's fucking carnage all over the place. Yeah. And we didn't even see it because the lights were off.
Yeah.
So, okay, so how do we slowly pick up the pieces and rebuild and repair and then go forward and just have that patience and that trust that things are going to work out as they're intended to?
Yeah.
Beautiful. Should we open the floor up to some Q&A?
Yeah.
Anyone want to? There we go. Miss Marie, yes, please.
So when we talked a little bit earlier, and we'll go into just your parents didn't you, and I did similar with my children, but I want to just emphasize something that you're bringing out that's really important. Because, I was just this young woman with kids trying to not poison them. Mm-hmm. So everything was delayed. And this is my daughter over here, Vanessa, who actually was taken out of her class at her little Valentine's Day party because she wasn't so. I forgot about that. It's okay now.
Yeah.
So of course, I have to get it. There's a lot of pressure. And what's happening is what you're doing is helping those of us who don't know, oh my gosh, I don't think this is a great idea. You're opening eyes to people who don't know anything about it, but also those of us who are going, well, I have to now, so I don't even know my rights. I don't want to do this, but she's going to miss all the Valentine's Day parties. Right. And that's just a small part of it, but people don't even realize what their rights are. They don't know, they don't have the information, because they don't know. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Yeah. How do you recommend people really understanding their rights and granted they're being taken away at a rapid pace?
It's difficult. What I'm involved in is difficult. It's difficult to have to say to people, intelligent people say, Miguel, are you telling me that I'm not supposed to trust the CDC, National Institutes of Health, WHO, the FDA, that some journalists have got this figured out, and all these other world-renowned scientists have got it wrong? And I'm like, I get it, man. That is a hard pill to swallow.
It's a heavy lift.
The answer to that, I cannot fit on a bumper sticker. So you got some time?
Yes, sir.
But just this week, in Michigan, Chicago, I guess, Lori Lightfoot had taken away all these government jobs from people and because they wouldn't get. and the courts just gave them back their jobs and back pay. Same thing happened in New York. So yeah, New York, the same thing. And the judge was even more specific there, saying this product never stopped infection or transmission. And therefore, there was no advantage to being, this was essentially illegal. And I just think, where would we be if no one had resisted, right? If those people hadn't resisted, then we would have no precedent set. Now imagine where we're at next time our government decides to overstep its boundaries. We will be able to say, New York, Chicago, like all these states, a lot of the lawsuits that we've won through my nonprofit, you can never do this again because we've just set precedents. And so, I don't know how I say to everyone out there, are we all like resist? I don't know. I don't know if we all have a different journey here, and maybe that's just a specific group of people that are supposed to stand for that, and the rest of us just walk off the cliff, which is, in many ways, this is going to be a cliff for a lot of people. It is proving to, I could go on and on, but we are watching all-cause excess mortality worldwide, unexplained, worse than itself. What is doing that? You can continue to listen to WHO and CDC if you want. They're trying to tell us all. They say now, Tony's saying, though we had the worst death rate, this is what his quote this week basically was, that I don't know what happened. It doesn't make sense. Something went wrong. And here's how I know it went wrong. The richest nation in the world with the best hospital systems in the world had more people die than any other nation in the world. And I just think, I know what went wrong. You went wrong. Right? Yeah, it's amazing you're saying that. Pretty clear. I don't know why anyone worships this guy anymore. I have no idea why we're not embarrassed that we put him on the cover of Time magazine. But we did basically what you asked to be done, and we have the worst record in the world. Nigeria kicked our ass. India, you know what I mean? Third world countries. Haiti has almost no death from. They couldn't afford, couldn't get near it. If they try to make an argument like they're not stacked on top of each other, they are living on top of each other in squalor. I think we have 3,000 deaths per million. Haiti has under 20 deaths per million. So this is all has to get out there. But all these things, I would say at this point, as hard as it is, especially, for those of us living in America still, and for those of you that have got out, good for you. It's paradise here, I get it. But our nation is hanging in the balance. We are on the verge of losing what that dream represented, what I think is the greatest governing set of documents that the world has ever seen in our Constitution and Declaration of Independence and Bill of Rights. It is all on the chopping block. And whether it's a centralized digital currency owned by the Fed, or it's the Green New Deal that is just now stating that 67% of cars are going to be electric in the United States of America by like 2032. That is destruction of humanity. There's no way you survive that. And what happens to Africa, where they're mining these, we're going to turn lithium and cobalt into blood diamonds, and do we not care that children's arms are like the carnage that's about to happen from the insanity? We have the story I did this week, this whole transgender enrollment of our children in kindergartens and first grade. I have no problem accepting people for who they are, but we are taking, I think on purpose, an argument for the super minority lowest common denominator that probably has some real issues that need to be dealt with, and we're making it all of our children's issue. We're undermining our children. We're undermining parents, and our governments are doing this to us, especially here in the United States of America. So I would say at this point, my perspective is I resist first, and you're going to have to talk me into it. You're going to have to show me some real data and evidence. Otherwise, I'm against almost everything coming out of my government at this moment.
Yeah. I'd love for you to share the text you sent me. I think it was last week. Very excited text about the huge win that you guys had with, and maybe just share what ICAN is so people who don't understand.
So, after I made Vaxxed, I traveled the country and then I ended up starting a nonprofit because it was all about MMR. It's the only thing I knew about. So at that point, I studied all that was done, how they determined it didn't cause autism and all these things. But as we toured the country, every film, when we would get done, there'd be this line of people that want to tell us their personal story about injury. And it was massive. I mean, one of the things that happened was, I think in the third screening, the first day we were kicked out of Tribeca. It's the most controversial film in the world. There's bomb threats being threatened. And, we find a theater in New York and there's a line down the block. I was thinking, who are these people? So the third screening, I decided the Q&A, will everyone with an injured child please stand up? I just want to see how many are out there. And 3/4 of the room stood up. And I felt like the oxygen had been sucked out of the room. It was incredible. I mean, I had just spent, a year basically, in this film, but I had no idea it was like this. And it wasn't just that screening. It was every screening, 4 days a week, all across America for an entire year. 3/4 of the audience is standing up. And I just thought, what the hell is going on here? How the heck did they get away with this? And people would come up to me and say, Del, obviously I'm not getting the MMR because your film is so powerful, but what about the other 16 in the schedule? And all I could say is, look, I haven't investigated them, but I will tell you this, that there's people lining up. We have now done over 1,000 interviews of these parents all across the country, and there's not a single that's not destroying lives. People are saying my child died after a flu shot, or a really popular one, our star athlete, softball player daughter, or soccer playing son has been paralyzed ever since he got his Gardasil. And the big one when it came to autism was more people were coming up to me and saying, we never got to the MMR. Our child regressed in autism after the DTaP. That was it more. I mean, my film was only about MMR. And they're like, we never even got that far, which is 2 years old. We lost our kid at 18 months with DTaP. And so I started a nonprofit because I wanted to be able to answer that. And so our nonprofit has read every single trial that has ever been done. I hired an attorney, a constitutional attorney, to sue the government because we have liability protections on. Not aware of that. In 1986, all liability was taken away, which is insane. When you think about the pharmaceutical industry, how often it puts out products that kill people, pays out billions of dollars after we find it out. We're going to give them a whole sector that we're never allowed to sue them. We're never allowed to get discovery. We're never allowed to find out what they know about these products and what they don't know.
Just so people know, the reason behind that was because they stopped making, right?
They threatened Ronald Reagan. They basically in 1986 said, we're going to stop making all if you don't protect us from liability. Why? In their own words, because we are losing so much money from death and injury lawsuits that we cannot make a profit. So when you think about the pharmaceutical industry and how many bad products are out there, they still make a profit on those, even when they lose a $3 billion lawsuit for Vioxx or talcum powder or, Fen-Phen. They did fine. In fact, you find out that they'd already done a mathematical calculation and said, we will totally accept the amount it will cost from those lawsuits because this is going to make us so much money. This is one of the sickest industries there is. Now, don't get me wrong. Great things come from pharma too. There's reasons it's there, but on its own, left to its own devices with no regulatory agencies in the way, which is what this has become, we're really in danger. And so we have been suing and winning against the National Institute of Health because we thought if we can't sue the manufacturers, let's sue the government that is covering up for them, that's taken on that liability, which is what happened in 86. They basically said, we're going to do all the safety science now. We are going to be responsible for the injuries, and we're going to leave pharma is going to be able to walk off with all the proceeds, never have to pay into anyone that's injured. We'll take that on. And it's amazing. I mean, this is I could go on and on. It's such an interesting topic. But
a podcast in and of itself.
You realize the government makes this decision thinking, it's not going to be that bad. And suddenly within moments, they have thousands of families lying down the block suing for autism that were going against pharma. And they're saying to themselves, oh my God, we're paying out about $4 million per case because of the loss of life in the future of this child. If we have to pay all these, we're going to bankrupt Health and Human Services. We're going to bankrupt, we could bankrupt this nation. And that's where we're at now. We are now at, autism is affecting 1 in, I believe it's 36 children is the official number now by the CDC. We have gone from 1 in 10,000 to in the 1970s and 80s to 1 in 36. It affects boys 4 to 1, which means we are most likely at about 1 in 18 to 20 boys is being diagnosed with autism in America. That is, and just think about this. For where anyone's at, that is a true pandemic. That is destructive. That means you will not forget about mounting a standing army, a decade or two down. We may not be able to mount a standing Starbucks. So we're in real trouble, and not a single news station talks about it. That tells you that there is something going on here, right? So anyway, we have been suing the government, winning against NIH, FDA, Health and Human Services. And then one of the biggest cases we had was Washington, D.C. passed a law that allowed a 12-year-old child to consent to vaccinations without parental consent. The law was passed in Washington, D.C. And this law, just to give you an idea of the attack on your family, this law mandated that the doctor would have to write up a fake card that did not include that the child agreed to, that the parents would see, and a different one they keep in-house. It mandated in the law that the insurance company has got to give you a different bill and bill you for something other than so you can't see it. The law is saying the insurance company has to lie to the family so they don't see that this happened. And then the school has to have a school recorded vaccination record that they keep and a different one that they hand the parents. You are talking about a collusion of government and, doctors and schools against the parents. We went and fought that and won. We were able to break that law and shut it down. But by far, 2 weeks ago, the biggest win we've had is Mississippi was the first state that I ever stopped. We had the Vaxxed bus and we were driving through with the film, and the moms, I got off the bus and said, we have all these meetings set up for you to talk to senators and assembly members and this and that. I was like, I'm a filmmaker. They're like, no, come on. And they dragged me in. I spent the whole day talking to politicians, and it actually changed my life. I came out and I was like, wow, I actually enjoy this. I'm really good at this. The whole game of sizing up a politician, trying to see what they care about. How is there a way in on this conversation? Because we're the redheaded stepchildren, seriously, oh, great, the anti-vaxxers are here. But so Mississippi has not had, they were robbed, SB 277 that took away basically religious and personal belief exemption in California. Mississippi lost theirs in 1979. I think it's the first state to be robbed of the ability to opt out of the program at all. And so I've been going there every year talking to their politicians, and they're in the Bible Belt. So it's one of the places where I started bringing in my background. My dad is a minister, talking about the Bible. How can you say you're created in the image and likeness of God, but you need 72 in order to live on this planet? And I was really getting through to them. But we just found an angle this year. Aaron did. He called me about a year ago and we were talking. He's like, look, I think there's a way to win the religious exemption back for the entire country. And I said, well, what is it? And he says, well, look, after there's been these lawsuits that happened because of where churches have been fined and everything. So they went to court to say, why was I shut down in a church, but Walmart was open? And almost unanimously across the country, courts are deciding, yeah, that was illegal. There's no way. And here's what it comes down to. Our Constitution, religious freedom is our first. There's a reason it's your First Amendment right. Freedom of speech, freedom of religion. And so what it states essentially is that wherever there is a secular protection, there must also be a religious protection. You cannot protect one group and then not protect the religious group. So in this case, Walmart was being protected and allowed to stay open. People could walk freely through the store, but a church wasn't being allowed to. That's illegal, and the courts have been stating that pretty much unanimously. And so Aaron said, we have the same argument. every state that has taken away a religious exemption is giving a medical exemption to some kids, whether they're too sick or this and that. That's a secular exemption. And so we sued the Attorney General of Mississippi for not protecting the First Amendment. His job is to protect the First Amendment. You are not protecting the First Amendment of the right to religious beliefs. And the reason being, you were giving a medical exemption to some kids and not giving a religious exemption to other kids. No one had ever used that approach before. And we just won. Mississippi is getting back the religious exemption immediately. Yeah. So that means we just set precedent to now we're going to go after West Virginia, California, and we hope to make sure that everyone has the ability to opt out if they want in the future.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. I guess we're on wrap up time. Yeah.
We're going to wrap. We're going to take a few moments and we'll come up with the panel. But dude, you're the best.
Thanks, man.
I love you,
Thank
man.
you.